I was talking to Daisy, and she was explaining to me the cameraman cut it after a while, but your blouse was open a little bit, you know, and it was
That was your favorite movie?
that was my favorite.
Classic television shows often contain hidden mistakes that escape viewers' attention for decades. The Dukes of Hazzard had its fair share of wardrobe mishaps, and one particular error involving Daisy Duke went completely unnoticed until years after the original broadcast. You know how we all think we've seen everything when it comes to classic TV? I'm talking about a blink and you miss it moment involving Daisy Duke that turns a simple chase scene into a full-on mystery. Well, stick with me, because this wild little mistake is just the beginning, and it only gets crazier from here. The iconic show that had a hidden secret. Anyone talking about classic television always finds a way to bring up the Dukes of Hazzard, and honestly, there is a good reason for that. The show first aired on CBS on January 26, 1979, and at the time, not many people expected anything too serious from a show built around fast cars, country roads, and two cousins always getting into trouble. But then, something surprising happened. The show did not just survive. The show exploded. How often does a simple idea turn into something that pulls in millions of people every single week? At one point, only Dallas had more viewers, which already says a lot about how big this became. Imagine entire households gathering every Friday night, waiting for the same car jumps, the same chase scenes, and the same familiar characters. What kind of magic keeps people coming back like that? The show came from the mind of Jai Waldron, who based the idea on a film called Moonrunners. That background explains why everything felt a little wild and a little rebellious, but still fun and easy to watch. Over 7 seasons and 147 episodes, the show built a world that felt simple on the surface, but somehow stuck deeply with audiences. Why did something so straightforward leave such a strong mark? Maybe because the show understood something important. Not everything needs to be complicated to be memorable. Then there is the cultural impact, which honestly feels even bigger than the ratings. Take the car alone. The General Lee became more than just a vehicle. The General Lee became a symbol. At the height of the show's popularity, that car received around 35,000 fan letters every single month. Think about that for a second. People were not writing to actors. People were writing to a car. What does that say about how connected audiences felt? One version of that same 1969 Dodge Charger later sold for $10 million in 2007, which shows just how far that connection went. And then there is the music. Waylon Jennings performed the theme song Good Old Boys, and that song went all the way to #1 in 1980. A television show that dominates ratings, influences music charts, and sells merchandise everywhere. How often does that happen all at once? The merchandise alone tells another story. Lunchboxes, toys, posters, and model cars filled stores everywhere. Kids wanted a piece of that world, and adults did too. That kind of demand does not come from nothing. That kind of demand comes from characters people care about. And that brings everything back to the cast. John Schneider played Bo Duke, the younger cousin who acted first and thought later, always shouting that famous yell and driving like no road had rules. Right beside Bo stood Luke Duke, played by Tom Wopat, who balanced everything with a calmer and more thoughtful approach. That mix created a rhythm. One cousin pushed forward, one cousin held things steady. Does that not feel like a combination that naturally works? Then there is Daisy Duke, played by Catherine Bach, whose style became so popular that the name Daisy Dukes turned into a phrase people still use today. Think about that level of influence. A character's outfit becomes part of everyday language. How many shows can claim that? The older presence came from Uncle Jesse, played by Denver Pyle, who brought warmth and wisdom into every situation. Uncle Jesse felt like the kind of figure everyone trusted, the kind of voice that kept everything grounded. And then came the villains, or maybe not even true villains, because everything carried a light and funny tone. Boss Hogg, played by Sorrel Book, and Sheriff Roscoe, played by James Best, brought humor into every conflict. Instead of fear, there was laughter. Instead of tension, there was fun. Would the show feel the same without that balance? Probably not. Even the small details added something unique. The cousins lived under probation, which meant no firearms. So creative solutions appeared, including bows and arrows. That detail alone made action scenes feel different from typical shows. And then there were the car stunts. Around 300 Dodge Chargers were destroyed during filming. 300. That number alone shows how much effort went into making every jump and every chase feel exciting. How many shows would take that kind of risk just to keep audiences entertained? What really keeps the show alive today, though, is something deeper than cars or jokes or even music. The real strength comes from the way the show connects across generations. Parents introduce the show to children. Those children grow up and share the same episodes again. That cycle keeps repeating. Why does that happen? Maybe because the show stays simple and clear. No heavy language, no extreme violence, just stories where doing the right thing matters and usually brings a reward in the end. That kind of message does not expire. And there is something else worth thinking about. In a world where shows often try to be darker or more complicated, this show remained light, fun, and easy to follow. Could that be the secret? Could simplicity actually be the reason for long-lasting success? It seems possible, because even decades later, people still talk about Hazzard County like it is a real place, like those characters are still out there driving down dusty roads and getting into trouble. So when someone asks why the Dukes of Hazzard still matters, the answer is not just one thing. The answer is everything combined. Memorable characters, exciting action, strong music, cultural influence, and a feeling that never really fades. And maybe the biggest question of all remains simple. How does a show that started in 1979 still feel alive today, like it never really left us? It is almost strange when you think about it. Decades have passed, trends have come and gone, entire generations have grown up and moved on. Yet somehow, this one show still holds its ground, like it belongs in the present moment. You start to wonder, what exactly did they get so right that others could not? Was it the characters, the timing, or something deeper that quietly connected with people in ways no one expected? That answer might never fully be explained, but one thing is clear. This kind of lasting impact does not just happen by accident. And just when you think you have understood its magic, a tiny, almost invisible moment slips through the cracks. A moment so subtle that hardly anyone noticed it at the time. Yet once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Stay with me, because what we are about to uncover next might completely change how you look at it forever. The wardrobe malfunction. Nobody noticed. Anyone who followed the Dukes of Hazzard closely would probably agree that Daisy Duke was never just another background character, and a lot of that came down to style, confidence, and a very intentional wardrobe that stood out in almost every scene. Catherine Bach did not simply show up and wear whatever was handed over by a costume department, because there was a level of personal input that shaped how Daisy appeared on screen. Reports explained that Catherine Bach actually designed most of Daisy Duke's outfits, and that decision alone added something unique to the character. Think about that for a second. How often did actors take full control of wardrobe choices in a major television show during that era? That kind of involvement made every outfit feel a bit more real and a bit more personal. The famous denim shorts became the headline piece, of course, but the wardrobe went far beyond that. Different boots, different heels, and even different casual footwear showed up depending on what each scene demanded. Some moments called for a more relaxed look, while other scenes required something more striking. That attention to detail did not go unnoticed, and many fans spent time discussing how Daisy's appearance always seemed carefully put together. Was that level of consistency just good styling, or was it part of a bigger effort to make Daisy unforgettable? Now here is where things get interesting, because even with all that care and attention, one very noticeable mistake managed to slip through, and not just for a short time but for years, without being called out by most viewers. During one particular chase scene, Daisy teamed up with Luke to track down Benny the Quill, and everything looked normal at first glance. But looking closer raised a simple question. Did something feel off during that sequence? At the start of the scene, Daisy appeared in white open-toe heels, which matched the usual confident and stylish look. Nothing strange there. Then the action moved into rough terrain, including rocks and a river crossing, and suddenly the footwear changed to running shoes. That switch might sound logical from a practical point of view. After all, who would try to cross slippery rocks in heels without risking a fall? But here is where the confusion really kicked in. Right before the moment involving quicksand, the heels somehow returned. No explanation, no transition, just a sudden switch back, like nothing had changed. That raised another question. How did that happen without anyone noticing during editing? The answer pointed straight to how television production worked at the time. Scenes were often filmed out of order, sometimes across different days, and sometimes under pressure to meet tight deadlines. Crew members likely made a quick decision to swap heels for running shoes during the river sequence to keep things safe for filming. That decision made complete sense behind the scenes. Safety always came first. But when it came time to piece everything together, continuity became the responsibility of editing, and that is where things slipped. The switch between shoes was never corrected, and the final version went out to millions of viewers. Here comes another interesting thought. Would anyone have noticed back then? Probably not as easily as today. Television screens during that period were not as sharp, and small details like footwear could easily go unnoticed, especially during fast-moving action scenes. But that was not the only moment that caught attention over time. Fans who revisited episodes years later started spotting other wardrobe issues, including one moment in Season 5 during an episode titled The Great Insurance Fraud. Around the 43-minute mark, Daisy was seen running alongside a pickup truck, preparing to jump in. Everything looked normal, until a small but noticeable wardrobe malfunction appeared on screen, revealing more than what producers likely intended. That discovery added another layer to the conversation. Was this just another rushed production moment? Or did it reflect how fast the team had to move to keep episodes coming out on schedule? Going back to the shoe-switching mistake, the scene came from an episode titled Baba White Sheep, which was part of Season 3. That detail matters because Season 3 sat right in the middle of the show's peak popularity. Millions of people tuned in every week, yet almost no one pointed out the error at the time. That alone says a lot. Did audiences simply miss it, or were viewers more focused on the action and storytelling than tiny details like footwear? Watching habits were different then. There was no pause button, no rewind, and definitely no high-definition screens to catch every frame. Once an episode aired, that was it unless a rerun came along. Looking back now, the mistake almost feels charming rather than problematic. It tells a small story about how television worked before modern technology changed everything. Production teams worked fast, actors moved between scenes quickly, and small details sometimes slipped through the cracks. Yet those imperfections also made shows feel more human. There was no endless polishing or digital correction. What audiences saw was often the result of real-time decisions made on set. In a strange way, that simple shoe switch became part of the show's legacy. It gave fans something to talk about years later and added a bit of mystery to an already memorable scene. Who would have thought that something as small as footwear could spark that kind of curiosity? That is the beauty of television history, isn't it? The way something so small, so easy to overlook in the moment, can quietly sit in the background for years, sometimes even decades, before someone finally pauses, looks a little closer, and realizes it was there all along. It is almost like these hidden details are waiting patiently, tucked between scenes and dialogue, knowing that one day someone curious enough will connect the dots. And when that moment comes, it does not just feel like a discovery, it feels personal, like you have uncovered a secret that millions of others somehow missed. Think about it for a second. How many times have we watched the same show, the same episode, over and over again, convinced we have seen everything there is to see. And yet, somehow, there is always that one detail, so subtle, so cleverly placed, that slips right past even the most attentive viewers. It is not because people were not paying attention. It is because sometimes the brilliance of storytelling hides in plain sight, blending so perfectly into the bigger picture that it becomes almost invisible. And that is where this story takes an unexpected turn. Because the detail we are about to talk about was not just overlooked for a few weeks or months. No, this one managed to stay hidden for years. Years of reruns, discussions, fan theories, and deep dives, and still, almost no one noticed. How does something like that even happen? Was it intentional, or just a coincidence that slipped through the cracks? Well, that is exactly what we are about to unravel. So stay with me, because once you see it, you will never look at that moment the same way again. Why it took years for anyone to notice. A calm and interesting explanation came up around how television used to work back in the original broadcast era. And honestly, the difference between then and now almost feels unbelievable when carefully explained. Back in the 1970s and 1980s, television did not look anything like what sits in living rooms today. Screens were smaller, picture quality was softer, and everything felt a bit less sharp. But in a strange way, that actually helped production teams more than anyone realized at the time. A simple question comes to mind here. How could lower quality ever be a good thing? The answer sits right inside the technical limits of that era. Television systems at the time worked with either 525 lines or 625 lines per frame, depending on location. And that already sounds a bit technical, but the real trick came from something called interlaced scanning. This method showed half an image at a time, switching between odd and even lines so quickly that the human eye believed a full picture was being displayed. In reality, only about half the detail existed in each moment. Isn't that interesting? A full image appeared complete, yet only part of the picture existed at any given second. That limitation created a softer and less detailed image, which meant small mistakes simply disappeared into the blur. Now, think about wardrobe changes or tiny mistakes between shots. Would anyone sitting in front of a small CRT screen really notice if a sleeve shifted slightly or if a prop moved just a little? Most likely not. CRT televisions came with natural scan lines, faint horizontal lines that broke up the image and made everything less precise. That alone hid a lot of things. Add the lower resolution on top of that, and suddenly, minor errors became almost impossible to see. Production teams did not need to worry too much about perfection in every tiny detail, because the technology itself covered those flaws. Does that mean mistakes did not happen? Of course not. Mistakes happened all the time, but the screens simply refused to expose them. It almost feels like the technology was protecting the illusion, doesn't it? Everything looked smooth enough for the audience, and that was all that mattered back then. Then, things started to change slowly. The move toward digital television began around the 1980s, and over time, standards became more organized. By 1995, official digital television standards had been adopted in places like the United States, and eventually, analog broadcasting came to an end in 2009. That moment marked a huge turning point. Suddenly, television was no longer soft and forgiving. Everything became sharper, clearer, and far more detailed. A new question naturally comes up. What happens when old shows meet new technology? That is where things became really interesting. Classic shows that once looked perfect on older screens were brought back and remastered into high-definition formats. At first, that sounded like a great idea. Who would not want clearer pictures and better quality? But something unexpected happened. All those little mistakes that stayed hidden for decades suddenly became visible. High-definition screens come with higher pixel density and much larger display sizes. That means every tiny detail gets stretched out and shown more clearly. A shirt that changed between shots now stood out. A prop that moved slightly now caught attention. A background detail that once blended in now became obvious. Isn't it surprising how how something that looked flawless before could suddenly look full of errors. The technology did not create new mistakes. The technology simply revealed what was always there. It is almost like turning on a bright light in a room that once looked clean in the dark. Once the light comes on, every small detail becomes impossible to ignore. Then, another layer added even more attention to these discoveries, and that layer came from fans. Over time, groups of dedicated viewers started forming communities, especially online, where discussions about classic television grew deeper and more detailed. These were not casual viewers anymore. These were people paying close attention, sometimes even watching episodes frame by frame. That alone raises another question. How far can curiosity really go? Apparently, very far. Fans began spotting continuity errors, wardrobe changes, and small production mistakes that millions of original viewers never noticed. A glass that changed position between shots, a tie that shifted, a background extra that disappeared. All these details became points of discussion. These communities did not just notice mistakes. These communities documented them, shared them, and built entire conversations around them. What started as simple observation turned into a detailed archive of bloopers and inconsistencies. It almost feels like a second life for these old shows, doesn't it? Instead of fading away, these shows gained new attention, not just for storytelling, but for the hidden details behind the scenes. And when combined with modern technology, the experience changed completely. Clear screens made details visible, and sharp eyes made sure nothing went unnoticed. Looking at everything together, a clear pattern forms. Older technology hid imperfections, while modern technology exposed them. Smaller screens softened reality, while larger screens sharpened every corner. Limited resolution created forgiveness, while high definition demanded precision. Isn't that a fascinating shift? What once protected production mistakes now reveals them without mercy. And at the same time, what once went unnoticed now becomes a topic of interest, discussion, and even entertainment. In the end, television technology did more than just improve picture quality. Television technology changed the way people see, notice, and even judge what appears on screen. What used to pass quietly now stands out clearly. What used to stay hidden now becomes part of the conversation. And all of this raises one final thought, one that lingers a little longer than the rest and quietly pulls you in. If so many details manage to stay hidden for decades, tucked away behind the scenes, and unnoticed by millions of viewers, then how many more are still out there, just waiting to be discovered? It makes you wonder what else slipped through the cracks, those tiny moments, overlooked errors, and subtle missteps that somehow made it into the final cut without anyone catching them. And the more you think about it, the more you realize this isn't just about secrets, it's about patterns. Because once you start spotting them, you can't unsee them. So stick with me till the very end, because what we're about to uncover next might completely change the way you look at your favorite shows, starting with the most common production mistakes in classic TV shows. Common production mistakes in classic TV shows. A calm but honest explanation would go like this, almost like a long chat over a quiet evening, where everything about television production starts to make more sense. The deeper the conversation goes, because on the surface, everything looks perfect, polished, and seamless. But behind that smooth finish sits a constant battle with time and money that never really slows down. And that alone raises a simple question: how can any production team truly get everything right when the clock never stops ticking and the budget keeps reminding everyone of limits? Television production follows strict schedules that cannot easily shift because broadcast slots are fixed, contracts are signed, and entire teams depend on each phase finishing exactly when planned. So even a small delay can ripple across departments like sets, lighting, costumes, editing, and even marketing. And once money enters the picture, things become even tighter, because every single detail costs something, from paying crew members to building sets to managing post-production work. So choices have to be made, and sometimes those choices come down to speed over perfection, which naturally leads to another question: what gets sacrificed when speed becomes more important than absolute accuracy? That is where continuity errors quietly step into the picture. And at first glance, such mistakes might seem surprising, but once the process becomes clearer, such slip-ups begin to feel almost unavoidable because scenes are rarely filmed in one straight line. Instead, scenes are broken into multiple angles, repeated takes, and sometimes even filmed days or weeks apart, which means keeping everything exactly the same becomes a real challenge. And even with script supervisors writing down every small detail about clothing, hair, props, and positioning, tiny differences still manage to sneak through, like a glass that moves between shots or a jacket that suddenly looks slightly different. And this leads to another simple but interesting thought. Would earlier television creators have even worried about such details? The answer turns out to be quite revealing, because in earlier years, reruns were not as common, and writers did not expect audiences to rewatch episodes again and again. So continuity across scenes or even across episodes did not carry the same weight as it does today. And that alone explains why older shows sometimes contain noticeable inconsistencies that modern audiences quickly point out. Another layer of this whole process involves stunt doubles and stand-ins, and this part often surprises people the most. Because while actors appear to handle everything on screen, much of the risky or physically demanding work is handled by trained professionals who match the actor's size and build. And this system keeps everyone safe while still delivering exciting scenes. But here comes another question. What happens when the match is not perfect? That is where small visual differences can appear, because wardrobe might not fit exactly the same, or movement might feel slightly different. And even though production teams try to hide these substitutions through careful camera angles and editing, sharp eyes can sometimes catch those brief moments where the illusion slips just a little. And those moments remind everyone watching that what looks effortless on screen actually requires a lot of coordination behind the scenes. Modern television has found ways to reduce some of these issues, especially with digital tools that allow editors to fix certain mistakes after filming, which sounds like a perfect solution at first. But then another question comes up: can technology fix everything? The answer is not quite. Because while digital touch-ups can smooth over small errors, larger mistakes often require reshoots, and reshoots bring back the same problems of time and budget, and sometimes even create new continuity challenges. So even with advanced tools, the balance between perfection and practicality still remains a constant struggle. Real-life examples make all of this even more relatable, because even experienced productions run into unexpected problems, like wardrobe malfunctions that require quick fixes under pressure, such as an instance involving Elizabeth Olsen, where a zipper issue led to being sewn into a costume in front of a large group of extras. And moments like that highlight how unpredictable filming can be, because no matter how much planning goes into a scene, something unexpected can always happen. And that leads to another interesting thought. How often do such behind-the-scenes fixes go completely unnoticed by audiences? The answer is probably more often than anyone realizes, because editors and crews work carefully to make everything appear smooth and natural. Even long-running shows sometimes reveal how flexible storytelling can be when production realities step in, like a sitcom that aired multiple Christmas-themed episodes within a timeline that technically should not allow that many holiday moments. And this raises a simple but honest question. Does strict realism always matter in entertainment? In many cases, the answer leans toward no, because the main goal remains to entertain, engage, and keep audiences coming back, even if that means bending time or overlooking small inconsistencies. At the end of everything, television production reveals itself as a careful balancing act between creativity, pressure, and limitation, where teams constantly make decisions that trade perfection for progress. And while mistakes might slip through here and there, those same imperfections quietly remind everyone watching that behind every polished scene sits a group of people working under real conditions, making real choices, and solving real problems. And maybe that is what makes the entire process even more fascinating. Because once the curtain is pulled back just a little, the question is no longer why mistakes happen, but rather how so much still comes together so well, despite everything working against complete perfection. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.